built many different monuments during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. For instance, Venezia Palace was built during the Renaissance by using parts of Coliseum. It depending on the need of the people. In front of you, by the way, you see a part of the huge brick support created by Stern and Valadier in order to make more stable the surviving parts of the monument. And you see many arches inside the Coliseum. The arches were very important because the ones in the ground floor allowed the entrance of spectators. According to documents, to scholars, Coliseum could contain 70 or 80,000 people, so a large number of spectators. And the arches were the best elements that could sustain such a big monument like this. The entrance inside the Coliseum was free. Everybody had to show the so-called tessera, which means ticket in Latin, wear a ceramic ticket, and had to sit in the sector which corresponded to his social class. The so-called cavea was the group of all the seats of Colosseum, was divided into five sectors corresponding to the social classes of Rome. So nearest the arena was the place of games, seated the noble people of Rome, the emperor, for instance, the senators. The senators had the privilege to have a personal seat made of marble, signed with his own name, with their own name. And on the other four sectors seated the other classes. For instance, in the middle seated the so-called equites, which means cavaliers, the ones who used to fight by horse. They were the traders of ancient Rome. And in the upper parts of Colosseum, in the worst seats, because they had a better visibility of the games, seated poor people and most women. According to Roman laws, in fact, women had to be separated from men, because it wasn't good that men try to pick them up in public places. But of course, the noble ones and Vestali were Roman priestesses, very important, devoted to the cult of Vesta, an important Roman goddess, had a better seat inside of the monument. We know that, especially during the Empire, love meetings were very common in public places, and especially the first emperor, Ottaviano Augusto, was a moral person, so he decided to divide the men from women to avoid these love meetings. But we know that sometimes the senators used to dress like poor people in order to meet the women in the upper parts. Okay, that's life. Okay. So I told you about spectators, and now I'm going to tell you something about the games. The games started in the early morning, and they were organized 3-4 times a year. It depended on the money, because they were very expensive. The manager of games was the emperor, of course, or the editor. And according to their money, to the money of Rome, they could organize these important games, which were an important chance to satisfy Roman people. They were an important political chance, very important. The games started with the so-called venationes, which means huntings. There were, of course, huntings of wild animals, for instance, elephants, ostriches, lions, panthers, giraffe, or bears, or swines, or even swines. And it depends. Sometimes there were hunters fighting against these animals, or animals fighting versus each other. Or sometimes there were animals making tricks. For instance, Martiale, a famous Latin poet, described in an elephant writing the name of the emperor on the sand by using his trunk. It was a marvelous trick. And animals were also the protagonists of a terrible game. It's not the exact name, because they were the so-called damnationes ad bestias, which means sentences of death of criminals or presumed ones who were slain by those wild beasts. terrible show. In fact, Damnationes used to take place during the break for lunch, when there was no more people, not a lot of people were inside of the monument, because it was terrible. Of course, inside the Coliseum, it was possible to eat. There were people cooking, there were people selling foods, and there were also concerts and plays. So it was an important. So Coliseum was the place for many important events. And in the afternoon, finally, there were the long-awaited Munera. Munera is the Latin name for gladiator games. Probably Munera had an Etruscan origin. The Etruscans were people who had a big influence on the Romans. The Etruscans used to celebrate those games in honor of the dead. So there were funeral games, which were converted by the Romans into common shows, everyday shows. Gladiators used to be the scum of Roman society. There were slaves, prisoners of war, criminals. But sometimes free people decided to become a gladiator because they could win important money prizes. But gladiators' life was hard. In fact, the most could die because of the many wounds they got during the fightings. It was possible for a gladiator to die inside the Coliseum. It depended on the way he fought. It is true that a gladiator could ask for mercy to the emperor, the so-called thumb up, thumb down. And sometimes, when a gladiator was about to die, there was his trainer going to the editor asking for mercy, because there was a gladiator business. And so they asked the trainers used to ask to the editors, please give him another chance. It's his first time in Rome. I spent a lot of money to train him. Give him another chance. And if he fought well, he could have another chance inside the Coliseum. And there were many gladiators fighting at the same time. Usually there were 20 gladiators divided into couples fighting at the same time. So all the people were excited in seeing these terrible shows. You see, people fighting against each other. And there were many gladiators fighting inside the Coliseum. The most favorite were, for instance, the so-called Thraci, which means people from Thracia. Thracia is a European region on the north of Greece. Thraci, they had a crested helmet, a small round shield, and a blade. There were also the so-called Mirmillones, which means Mirmillus fish. Mirmillus was a fish the Romans really liked. In fact, they had a fish-shaped helmet. There were the so-called, and a blade too. There were also the so-called Reziari, which means people with a net. In fact, they had a net and a trident as weapons. And finally, there were the so-called Secutores, which means stalkers in a way. Secutores used to fight against Reziari, and they had a long sword and a long shield. The last gladiator games took place in 436 AD. Then they became illegal because Rome was a Christian city, a Christian capital, and those games were not good according to Christian religion. The last games inside the Colosseum took place during the first part of the 6th century AD, in 527 AD. There were the last Damnationes organized managed by Theodorico, the Goths king. And after that year, the monument was abandoned and became this large supply of building materials and this sort of block of flats. Okay, now I want to show you the interior of the monument. I'm going to tell you something more about the architecture of a Colosseum.